My name is Jennifer Barba, and I'm part of the Sloan admissions team. And it's my pleasure to also be joined by several of my colleagues, Alexis Marcus, Rich Landry, and Lindsay Cope, who are all working both behind the scenes and together with me through the presentation today. And so, as quick introduction, again, my name is Jen. I manage the evaluation team at the Sloan School. We manage admissions, or I should say the evaluation process across 5 different master's programs at Sloan. And today our intention is to share a bit more with you about the Sloan Fellows MBA admissions process and give some tips for the application. So we'll get started. So this is just a quick reminder. We always like to start with the mission of the Sloan School as well as the Sloan Fellows MBA program, which is to equip principled, innovative leaders with the skills, perspectives, and habits necessary to transform the world's important organizations and institutions. And so now more than ever, this is so important as every industry is being impacted due to the current global pandemic. And we are doing our best to modify the way we're teaching in order to equip our students with the skills and the practice that they need to go out and be principled leaders after graduating from a program like this. And so, I'm gonna just I'll go into a couple different slides and give some overview of things. I know some questions are already coming in order to kind of manage expectations. We're gonna go through about 10 to 15 minutes of content through slides and application tips, and then we'll take live Q&A at the end. So if you'd like to type your questions into the Q&A box, we'll definitely get to them. Towards the end, we'll stay on and answer as many questions as we can. And then also my colleagues, Rich and Lindsay, behind the scenes will help try to answer, type answers to some questions as well. So, I think it's always important to start off with an update on COVID-19 and what's happening at MIT Sloan this fall. And so we are on campus. Students across all graduate programs at the Sloan School have their choice to join us on campus, to join classes virtually, or some classes are being taught in a hybrid format. So every program has access to in-person instruction on campus, as well as every class is being taught virtually. So students have the ability to make the decision that's best for them. And this slide just kind of represents our philosophy of what we call the 4 W's, making sure we're staying safe. There's lots of different protocols in place. Students are being tested twice a week. And if you are on campus, there's a lot of protocols in place to make sure we are doing our best to ensure everybody's safety. And then decisions about how the spring semester and beyond will be delivered are going to be made closer to that time in anticipation of hopefully things improving and being able to bring even more access to campus in the spring semester, and then hopefully by next summer and next fall, things will also continue to improve. And so, I think this slide is just a quick representation. So we have the Sloan Fellows MBA class that is represented right now. So the Sloan Fellows program, as many of you know, begins in June. It's 12 months, a 1-year program. And the students that joined us this past June over the summer, it was a virtual program. And then in the fall, we have this kind of hybrid in-person format based on student preference. And so we have 107 students in the Sloan Fellows MBA class right now. The average years of experience is 14 years, average age is 38. We have about 38 countries represented. 30% or so is from the US, and then the gender breakdown. So this is kind of a big picture glimpse of what the class profile looks like. No major changes or shifts from previous years. Typically we're looking to bring in, 100 to 110 students each year. And this next slide will give you a little bit more information around what our ideal candidate is. So as you know, the Sloan Fellows MBA program is designed for individuals who have significant work experience, and we're teaching our MBA at an accelerated pace based on the experience that you're bringing in. So typically a Sloan Fellow has about 10 years of experience, or a minimum of 10 years of experience. They have examples and they have experience leading a team, leading others, and with that also comes management experience. experience. You know, they're committed to a global environment. The class, as you just saw, is incredibly diverse, with students coming from many different countries and many sets of experiences. And we're looking for individuals who are comfortable with, you know, a quantitative approach to decision making, you know, have evidence in their background of what we call quant comfort. And then obviously English is important. All of our courses are being taught in English. And the candidates coming in have to be able to effectively communicate in English as their primary language. And they're committed to, you know, diving deep into this experience for 1 full year, meaning that this is their full-time job for a year. They are not working full-time in addition to the Sloan Fellows experience. So right now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Alexis, who's going to go through a bit more about the application components.
Great, thanks, Jen. I think this is a good transition. We just talked about the ideal candidate. So how do you showcase that throughout your application? So the next couple slides here, we're going to go first through the checklist and then into each component. So thinking about what Jen just talked about on the ideal candidate, how can you showcase that throughout your application? And these are the components that you're going to want to include evidence of those different pieces. So the first thing is the resume, the cover letter, the org chart, our recommendation letter, your transcripts, test scores, which I'm going to talk about, or Jen's going to talk about in a little bit, and our video and additional references. So those are kind of all of the different components. We do have our first deadline coming up on October 6th. And then we'll start reviewing applications, looking them over and reviewing them in full. And then we'll send out interview invitations by the end of October. So that's when you can anticipate a decision on that front for Sloan Fellows. All interviews will be conducted virtually. So next, let's just kind of jump into the evaluation process. So all of the applications, as I mentioned, are reviewed after the deadline. So there's no rolling admissions. All of the applications will be reviewed by at least one person from our admissions committee. Our admissions committee is made up of 20 or more professional staff that are on our team or have been working with us very closely for a number of years and are very familiar with the process. Applicants are reviewed for 2 different kind of buckets, like we like to call them, our demonstrated success and our personal attributes. So how well are you working in a team? How do you solve problems? How do you communicate with others? We're kind of putting that on this XY axis, as you can see here, and scoring you on those different competencies. And so you, again, are going to want to think about how you're showcasing all of those things throughout your application and advocate for yourself so that, you know, we can find those specific examples throughout the application. So the first component that I want to talk about is the cover letter. I know I've already seen a couple questions coming in about the cover letter. So the word count is 500 words. So for Sloan Fellows, it's 500 words. And I know it says that on the website, so just keep that in mind. And then you're going to want to follow all the formatting instructions that are online. But in terms of what you want in the content, we want you to sell yourself. We want you to think about why you're a good fit for Sloan Fellows and also why Sloan Fellows is a good fit for you. And so, you know, sharing those, share your long-term goals, share your immediate goals so that we can understand kind of what you hope to get out of this program. So the next component here is the resume. The resume, again, is going to be have formatting instructions, so 2 pages, Times New Roman size 10 font, and we do want to see it in reverse chronological order. One of the questions that we often get is about the redaction, so make sure that you take off your contact information, whether or not you completely remove that contact information to gain a couple extra lines on your resume, or you just, you know, black it out. Either is fine. It's completely up to you. And we do that for a very good reason. We have a number of calibration meetings with our admissions committee, so we want to have up resume examples on the screen that we can discuss without having, you know, your personal data and personal information up there. So just, you know, make sure that it's easy to read, follow a standard format, and definitely show us your quantifiable accomplishments. We want to see your leadership. So don't just tell us day to day. Make sure that you're giving us actual things that we, you know, things that you've built upon throughout your career. So the video statement is my favorite part of the application. It's a 60-second video with no editing. It's just a one take where you're speaking directly to the camera and you are introducing yourself to your classmates. I think this prompt can sometimes lead to a little bit of confusion because no one else is seeing it except for the admissions committee, but we are asking you to introduce yourself to your fellow classmates and tell us a little bit more about yourself. It's an opportunity for you to be creative or just to kind of let us know a little bit more about who you are. And so don't think that we're looking for anything specific, but you might want to be unique, but also be using your best judgment. This is part of your application, and also being aware of your surroundings in terms of whether or not it's loud outside or you have music going. You don't want to have music in the background, so think about turning that off. Music and subtitles are definitely something that you want to avoid in the video. Your recommendation letter. So the recommendation letter, you'll submit one letter of recommendation. The one thing that I would recommend doing as soon as possible is getting your recommender's contact information added into the application. We do use the GMAT common letter of recommendation. So once you put their contact information into the application, it will email them a link to fill out either short answer questions or upload their own letter. So the reason I say do that early is so that they have ample time to submit their answers. And also if there's any issues, sometimes it does happen that, our email gets blocked. So we want to make sure there's ample time. We do need to get that letter of recommendation by the deadline. So thinking about that, October 6th is just a couple weeks away here. And if you, haven't already talked to your recommender, you'll want to get that out as soon as possible. Thinking about who can write your letter of recommendation, you definitely want someone that's familiar with the Sloan Fellows program and can talk about why you're a good fit and also what what it will help you do in your career and your progression. If you are a company sponsored applicant, you must have your letter of recommendation written by your direct supervisor or superior. So next on the list is additional references. So as I mentioned, we only have one letter of recommendation, and oftentimes folks want to submit more than one. Because there's only one, we have added this additional references. This is an opportunity for you to provide contact information for 2 more folks that can speak to your abilities. So you can think of these very, very similarly to your recommender. It's just that they're not going to be submitting a letter. We may or may not reach out to your references. Don't think it's a good thing or a bad thing either way. It really depends on the situation, whether or not we need a little bit more information. And we will not ever call a reference out of the blue. So, we'll make sure that we send them an email, schedule a mutually convenient time. And of course, if they do not speak English, we will coordinate getting a translator. And so questions that we would ask references are the exact same questions that you can see on the application for the letter of recommendation. So whatever questions the recommender is answering in that letter are very similar to the questions that we would be asking a reference. So the last piece that I want to talk about before handing it back to Jen is the org chart. So the organizational chart is a 2-page chart where you can kind of show us where you fall within your greater organization. So as we mentioned, we want to see leadership for Sloan Fellows. So, kind of showcase where you are and, who's reporting to you, who are you reporting to, who are you working with on a day-to-day basis. Give us a good sense of, what your interactions look like. You can also include, any growth that you've had within that company. So certainly, if you've been there for a while and you have progressed, indicate that on the organizational chart. We do include examples of this on our website. There's also a link in the application, so feel free to look at that. Just, be sure that this is not kind of an opportunity for us to count up your direct reports, and we understand that folks are in different positions, and it can be confusing depending on your current role. So just think about it in terms of where you are. So if you are a solo practitioner or an entrepreneur, you might have, outside folks that you interact with on a day-to-day basis. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the org chart. I'm going to hand it over to Jen to talk a little bit more about test scores.
All right, thanks, Alexis. So we do have a slight update to our test score, our standardized testing policy. We've made the decision recently at Sloan for all the graduate programs at the Sloan School to allow for applicants just this year to submit an application and be reviewed without a test. And this is not to say that the tests are not going to remain a required component of the application, because beyond this year they will. But given the current situation with a global pandemic, we realize that there are many applicants who would like to apply but do not have easy access to taking a test. And we've seen lots of requests come in and data about that, and also recognize that a lot of people may have compromised immune systems or health issues and may not feel comfortable going to a testing center to sit and take an exam for several hours. So out of, an abundance of sympathy for applicants this year, we want to, share an update that you can apply and be considered for the Sloan Fellows MBA program, in addition to any of the graduate programs at the Sloan School this year, without submitting a test, and that your application materials, will be reviewed in a holistic way. They always have been. A test has only been, one component of the overall application process and the overall competency model that Alexis has touched on throughout all of the different, pieces of data that we collect. So, this year you can apply without a test, but if you have a test, we encourage you to submit it. And that would be a GMAT, a GRE, executive assessment. Those are all, great indicators of quantitative ability. And in addition to that, we're very interested in any additional pieces of relevant coursework or academic work that could help convey to the admissions committee your comfort level and your aptitude when it comes to quantitative abilities. So, of course, we ask for all of your transcripts from anywhere that you've received a degree from, but in addition, we've added some fields to the application this year to ask about any additional coursework that you've taken. So, oftentimes we see this particularly with the Sloan Fellows MBA population, as you've gone through your career, you've gained additional professional certifications, you've taken non-degree coursework to build the skills that you need, whether it be with, possibly computer programming or statistics or some type of analytics work that you've done. So there's lots of fields in the application now for you to include any additional non-degree coursework or professional certifications that you've taken, as well as any additional pieces of kind of what I'd bucket as academic evidence that you'd like to share with us. Again, the application is considered in a very holistic way. We're looking for evidence of all of these different competencies, and tests were one way that we could evaluate quantitative abilities, but certainly that's not the only way. And for this year, we are being sympathetic to the situation that we're all in. And so if there are additional questions about this, we're happy to kind of address them a little bit later in the webinar. And then just in terms of preparing for the interview, so Alexis touched on this, but just to reiterate, every application that comes in is reviewed by the admissions committee, and then based on those initial reads, we determine who gets invited to interview. So the interview is by invitation only. It certainly signifies that you've made it to an advanced stage of the evaluation process. If you are invited to interview for this year, at least, it's going to be a virtual interview. We really miss the ability to come and meet you in person, but we're not able to travel this year, so it will be a virtual interview. They typically last around 30 minutes. You'll meet on a live video with a member of the admissions committee. The interview is asking behavioral-based questions or evidence-based questions based on your past experiences. We're looking to dig deeper into evidence of leadership, problem solving, how you're able to work with other people in order to, achieve intended results. And then in addition to that, we may ask some clarifying questions based on questions that I might have as a reader. Maybe, I had questions about why you switched positions, or, a little bit more detail or context around the startup that you're involved in, or, whatever it may be. So there's some clarifying questions, some kind of behavioral evidence-based questions. And then always at the end, we would ask, why are you interested in coming to study at the Sloan Fellows MBA program? Why is this unique, mid-career program the right match for you? And what are your career goals after completing the program? So, be kind of prepared for that question in terms of positioning for us. What is the value proposition for you of coming to earn the Sloan Fellows MBA, and what are you hoping to do after graduating? And then with all of that, why is MIT the best match for you to achieve those goals? And then we'll always leave time at the end of those interviews to answer any additional questions that you may have for us. Alexis touched on it, but interview invitations for round 1 candidates will go out towards the end of October. Interviews will take place throughout the month of November. If you apply in round 2, interviews will take place likely in February. And then if you apply in round 3, interviews will take place in kind of, the later part of March. All right, so I think Alexa's going to take over for some additional tips.
Yeah, absolutely. And then once we finish this up, we can open up for questions. So
Yep.
in terms of just tips, we just want to remind you that we're here, we want to admit you. So be an advocate for yourself. That's really what the idea is here. And so when Jen talked at the beginning about the ideal candidate, and I mentioned, putting together a whole package that shows us, just make sure there's no holes in it. Make sure you're answering our questions. Make sure that, you've submitted what you need to submit so that we have all the answers. You don't want to leave us guessing or leave us assuming something. So we're looking for evidence and reasons to admit you throughout that application. You also want to apply early. So thinking about the different rounds, if you are ready and your application is ready to be submitted, absolutely go ahead and submit it. We have more seats available, of course, in round 1. And as we start admitting people throughout the year, that there's less and less seats available. Also, if you are waitlisted in round 1, we will reconsider you in each round, and you'll get an updated decision at the end of each round. You can only apply 1 time per cycle. I also recommend applying early for international students, certainly for visa considerations. Make sure that you're following the instructions and the directions on the application. I know that sometimes it can be challenging to fit things into what our page limits are, but you have to be creative, but also include that information. And we know that it can be done. So please, try to follow those to the best of your ability. We want you to be yourself. So don't think that you need to kind of put on some sort of persona for the admissions committee. We really want to get to know you individually throughout your application. And then if you do move on to the interview round, during the interview. And finally, we're here to help you. So if you have questions, feel free to email us, ask us those questions. That's why we're on this webinar today. And I think that's probably a good transition to open it up for questions.
So I'd love to invite my colleague Lindsay on. Here she is, and she's going to help moderate the questions for us.
Hi there. We have a few general questions just about people deciding between the MBA program and the Sloan Fellows MBA program. Can you explain sort of what would be the main factor in making that decision?
Yeah, so the main factor is really the length of time of the program. So the MBA program is two years full-time, and the Sloan Fellows MBA is 1 year. But really the most important difference is the ability to have an internship. So if you're in the 2-year MBA, you have that summer in between to have an internship. It's a great opportunity to try something new if you're looking to use the MBA experience to make a career change. Oftentimes we see Sloan Fellow MBAs, continuing within the same path or with, on the same road that they're on, maybe a slight deviation from what they were doing before, but they're not typically using the MBA experience to make a huge career shift. And often, you need that internship experience to make that career shift. But for Sloan Fellows MBAs, we are available to answer any additional questions. You can schedule a quick one-on-one phone call with us if you haven't already. It is a unique program, and we do want applicants to apply to the Sloan Fellows MBA who understand, what the program is all about and any kind of, potential expectations that they have of the MBA experience. We want to make sure that this could address that for them.
Now we have a cover letter question. Should we stick to just one story or highlight different qualities through multiple stories?
For the cover, go ahead, Alexis. Okay, so the cover letter, it's only 500 words. I would think of it just like a cover letter you would use to apply for a job. You might want to highlight 1 or 2 of your past accomplishments as, some things that you're really proud of accomplishing. And then maybe a paragraph or a couple sentences on why you're pursuing the Sloan Fellows MBA and why MIT Sloan. What are your goals for the program? Telling multiple stories in the cover letter, it can be difficult given the kind of limitation of the word count.
That brings us to a similar question about the resume. Any tips for how to condense all of your experiences in just 2 pages? Can you suggest that the admissions committee also review a LinkedIn?
Yeah, so the resume is 2 pages. I would say focus more on your accomplishments and less on the job description that you had. So we don't need to know what you did on a daily basis. We're really interested in more of what were the things that you accomplished at each of those roles. And then we do ask for your LinkedIn profile, and should we have additional questions, we would click on it, or we would link to it. I'll say oftentimes I do click on the LinkedIn profile just to kind of help me link out to what the different companies are that you've worked for if I'm not familiar with them, so I can kind of get a little bit more of a sense of the scope of the company or what that company does. But we do look at the LinkedIn profile, I'd say, for the majority of people as well.
Now a question about letters or the letter of recommendation. Does it have to be a current supervisor who writes the letter?
Only if you're sponsored. If you're a company sponsored applicant, then it has to be your current or direct supervisor. If you are not, it does not need to be. It most of the time is, I would say, but certainly, if there's an extenuating circumstance or you're not letting them know that you're applying, or whatever the situation might be, it doesn't absolutely have to be. But you want to think about who can provide current examples, and you don't want something that's very dated.
All right, another great kind of general question. What do you mean when you say that candidates have to be quant comfortable?
Yeah, so you are applying to the MBA program at MIT. You will have to do problem sets. It is going to be, quantitative. We have a core curriculum that's going to ask you to, be comfortable with, lots of different quantitative modeling and problem solving. And so we're looking for evidence in your past experience that you've demonstrated the ability to do this. And that doesn't always have to come from your past academic work, because certainly for this population that may be 20 years ago, but it, more importantly, would come from your work experience. We're looking for, comfort with using data to make decisions about things ultimately. And that comes from, again, a lot of different components of the application. We can see that through, obviously through test scores and through academic experience, through other relevant coursework. We'll see it through the nature of the work experience that you have. You could ask your recommendation letter to speak to your quantitative ability if it's something that that you feel nervous about or that you feel needs to be highlighted for us. And then we would potentially ask about some of it during the interview as well.
Now we have a great question. How does the admissions committee look at applicants with a background in entrepreneurship or social entrepreneurship?
We love it. Yeah. I mean, we're really looking to see people coming from lots of different backgrounds. It does not matter to us what you've been doing, as long as what you've been doing well. And that we can sort of measure the success of that or see the evidence of success in the work that you've been doing. And so for entrepreneurs, it's really about, what type of organization have you been a part of? How have you been able to gain funding or traction? What have you learned from your experiences? Certainly, we do not expect every entrepreneurial venture to succeed, but it's what are some of the lessons learned? How have you applied that to the next thing that you've been involved with? So for entrepreneurs, we see a lot of entrepreneurs applying to the Sloan Fellows program. There's an amazing network to support entrepreneurs, of course, at MIT, but we're going to be looking for kind of the size and the scope of the organization that you've been a part of, existence of funding, how many employees, how many clients, and if we can't gather all of that from the written application, we'll certainly go into a lot of clarifying questions during the interview.
And then any tips on who an entrepreneur should select for their recommender?
It's your call. So you're the best person to make that decision. It could potentially be an advisor to your company. It could be, a client. It could be, someone from a previous employer, somebody who can really speak and give us evidence of the answers that give us evidence to answer the questions that we're asking. There's 5 or 6 prompts on the recommendation letter that we ask you to address. But also keep in mind that you don't want the admissions committee to think of it as a conflict of interest. So if it is positioned where, this person maybe works for you, that might not be a good choice.
We have a question about non-traditional applicants. Do you receive applications from people who are doctors or who have sort of atypical backgrounds for an MBA?
Yeah, Alexis, you want to take it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have folks from all sorts of backgrounds. So, even if you feel as though, you're in a unique situation, please know that there are other people that have pursued and gone through or are currently going through the Sloan Fellows program. So, don't hesitate to apply just because you think that maybe you're the only one in that situation. We absolutely have a diverse class pool.
Yeah, and if you have questions about, am I a good match, or is there somebody like me that exists there, email us and we can likely find someone to connect you with who is similar.
Great. We have a few questions about the org chart. Is it required to have direct reports and to be a people manager? Can you speak a little bit about what we're looking for?
Yeah, so for this program, we're looking for some evidence of leadership capabilities. And it doesn't mean that in your current role, you have to be managing people, but we're looking for kind of evidence of your ability to lead and your ability to manage teams. And so if it's not directly represented on the org chart, I would try to highlight examples of previous examples where you might have managed a team or led a group to achieve, an intended outcome.
A few questions about financial aid. Do you need to do anything to apply for financial aid? What does it look like?
So I assume by that question of financial aid, it's referring to fellowships. And so to be considered for fellowships, you do not need to do anything in addition to applying. We have, a fellowship fund, a fund that helps to support students. It's a merit-based award system. And so fellowships would be awarded at the time of admission. In addition to that, there are some kind of outside awards that are offered to students. So top of mind would be the Legatum Center at MIT. You do have to apply separately for that. And each year there are typically a couple Sloan Fellows who receive Legatum funding. And that's really tied to individuals who are interested in kind of social entrepreneurial ventures in the developing world. But you could take a look at that and their deadline. That's really the only significant fellowship out there that would require an additional application process. But, that deadline is usually in late January or early February. So we also reference that in our app, on our website and highlight it in the application as well. But for the most part, there's nothing extra that you need to do.
We have a question about if you're admitted this year, are you able to defer a year?
Yeah, so we try to have applicants apply in the year that they intend to join us. So, deferrals can get a little bit messy, and certainly this past year we were, very flexible and allowed applicants or admits who were not able to come this year to defer a year. But in a normal cycle, we would expect for you to come in the year that you apply. I'll say there's always an exception to the rule. We try to be, as flexible as possible, but, usually it's only for like extenuating circumstances that we would allow for a deferral.
And can you speak to deferrals from last year and if the pool this year is going to be more competitive?
Yeah, so we did offer a number of deferrals last year, and because of that, it may be a little bit more competitive. At this point, we do hope to enroll the same number of students, which, our target's around 110 Sloan Fellow MBA students. But, I do know that some of the people we offered deferrals to are not going to join us. So, or are not going to join us this year, I should say. So, I think that, it might be 1 or 2 percentage points off in terms of an acceptance rate, but I don't think it will significantly impact the process.
And speaking of the makeup of the class, can you speak to how many students are self-sponsored versus sponsored by their companies?
Yeah, so I think it's around between 45 and 50% of the class is typically sponsored by a company or sponsored, we'll say, sponsored by a third party. So, it's not, sometimes it's a government organization. It's not always a professional sponsorship. So that being said, about half the class is self-funded. And then of those students in the class, maybe 20% or so of those self-funded students are typically entrepreneurs. So, there's a good split, but, many students are, taking loans or self-funding to pay their tuition. And then in terms of job placement after, I can kind of see where this might be leading to. The Career Development Office has dedicated career advisors, as well as lots of different programming to help support Sloan Fellows MBAs to create kind of a customized career search that meets their individual needs, taking into account the previous experience that they have and then their goals for the future.
And along the same lines of the makeup of the class, how does the admissions committee view someone who already has a 2-year MBA in their past?
Yeah, so we will consider you, but you should certainly address why you need an additional MBA in the cover letter. So we understand there are lots of folks out there who maybe pursued an MBA immediately after undergrad or much earlier on in their career, and they're at a different kind of stage in their career at the point they apply to the Sloan Fellows MBA, and they're looking to earn an additional degree. So we will certainly consider you, but it would be kind of the number one question you should try to address in that cover letter.
All right, this is kind of circling back to our conversation a little bit ago about the sort of traditional backgrounds of candidates. For someone with a more traditional background like consulting or banking, any tips on how to differentiate themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think we get this question a lot. I know we get this question a lot, and it's not really about differentiating yourself. It's more about just demonstrating to us how your career path has excelled at whatever it is you've been doing. We know it's hard to differentiate among lots of different consultants or, associates in finance, and that's okay. We're looking to see what is it about the work that you've been doing that, has helped you to excel and move forward in your career.
Can you speak to any other recommendations, math refresher courses or things that candidates should be doing now to prepare themselves?
Yeah, so, often we do, well, I'll say everyone admitted to the Sloan Fellows MBA program is asked to complete kind of a math prep online program. It's, it's a short series. I think in total it maybe takes 20 hours, but, it's intended to help polish up your skills to, be best positioned to, jump right into the core curriculum. But then, before that, if somebody who is applying who has kind of a liberal arts background or not too many quantitative courses background, and they're also coming from, some work experience that doesn't have a lot of quantitative requirements, then you might want to consider taking like a statistics class or a microeconomics class. I think those are typically the two that can help best prepare you. It doesn't matter to us where you take them. They can be, an online class. Really, it's just about getting exposure to the content so that you feel comfortable.
All right, slight from an application related question, but I think this is so important for Sloan Fellows. Can you just talk a little bit about the Fellows family experience?
Yeah, sure. So, Sloan Fellows are certainly coming at an age and stage in their career where they're not alone, and we embrace, the student as well as their significant other and family members. It is an incredible community that we bring together, and there's and that community often grows throughout that 12 months together. So there's lots of ways for Sloan Fellows families and children to get involved. We have lots of different community events. We have resources across the MIT campus. There's, many extracurricular events that invite their significant others and or family members to participate. And, you'll find lots of resources online. We're happy to connect you with current students who are coming with, or who are here, I should say, with spouses and or young children. It is a bit of a different experience than the 2-year MBA in that regard. And, it's really nice to be able to get to know not only the student, but also their family.
speaking of the 2-year MBA, if someone is planning to apply for the 2-year MBA, do they need to do anything different to apply for Sloan Fellows? Can they apply for both at the same time?
Yeah, so you have to apply individually to each program. So, if you are applying to the 2-year MBA, there is a box, and vice versa on the Sloan Fellows application. There is a box if you're also interested in being considered. So that would be, we would, maybe send you additional information about the other programs, and but it does not automatically put you in that applicant pool. So in order to be considered, you need to apply independently to each program.
Now, speaking of work experience, the Sloan Fellows MBA program requires a minimum of 10 years. Is more considered better?
Not always, but it's certainly, there's no limit. We certainly have people entering this program who have more than 20 years of experience, and it's really just about when it makes sense for, their unique career path. So a minimum of 10 years, just because we feel as though you need some context of professional experience before, entering the classroom and having enough experience to relate to the different cases and problems that are being presented, and also to be able to handle the accelerated pace of the program, because it is just 1 year versus 2 years, but there is no upper limit.
Thank you. Now we have a question from someone who's applied for a Sloan program in the past. Would they be considered a reapplicant if it was for the 2-year MBA, for example?
They're not really considered a reapplicant, but we do ask on the application, have you ever applied to any of the programs at Sloan, and if so, when? And so, sometimes it helps with sharing like transcripts or things like that. But if it's from a different program, we would not reference that application in the review process.
We have a question about additional coursework certifications that people have earned. Where's the best place to include those in the application?
Yep, so we've added a number of new fields in the application in the relevant coursework section, or the academic, I think it's called academic information and relevant coursework. So there's lots of different fields there to add it.
I just want to clarify, because I know a lot of people are coming on asking that. It's under the relevant coursework tab. If you scroll down to the bottom, it says upload supporting material. I know a lot of people are asking about MicroMasters.
And here's an easy one. Is the TOEFL mandatory?
It is not, no. So TOEFL has never been mandatory for the Sloan Fellows MBA, but in an effort to accept any additional, evidence of standardized tests or anything else that you may have, we're willing to accept any additional data that you want to share, but it's not required, and in the future it will not be required, not TOEFL.
Another letter of recommendation question. Would it hurt you to have a colleague who you've known for an extended period of time write your letter of recommendation? Would that have any negative impact?
Alexis,
as opposed to a senior leader?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to use your best professional judgment here in terms of what content they will be able to provide. So again, you want to make sure that they're going to be able to answer those questions. And if they're just a colleague, do they know you in the correct professional capacity to be able to speak to your abilities in certain ways and your growth over time, or are they only seeing you on that colleague level? So you really need to review those questions and make sure that they have the capacity and ability to answer those questions, and then think about whether or not a superior would be more appropriate. But it's not a negative, it's just you want to make sure that they can answer the questions.
We have a question here about someone who maybe doesn't have a fantastic GPA. How can you position yourself favorably to the admissions committee?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we're looking at the entire application. So, make sure that you're showcasing all of your skills and abilities on the rest of the application. So whether that's the resume or the org chart in your video, your cover letter, those are all components that you have the opportunity to tell us about your candidacy. Why are you a dynamic candidate that's going to be a great fit for the Sloan Fellows class? So it's not just looking at one number and thinking, okay, that's the end all be all. We really want to know a little bit more about you so that we can make an educated decision when making our admissions decision.
Here's a good, oh, Jen, did you have a
No,
follow-up?
I'm good. Yeah.
A question from an applicant. Would it be helpful to reach out to the admissions team and set up an appointment to introduce yourself before applying?
Unfortunately, we don't have the capacity to allow for that. So, that's why, events like this are designed. We also offer lots of different coffee chats, designed for small group interaction with a member of the admissions committee. You can sign up for those. There's several of them each week, and lots of other events for you to get to know current students and alums as well.
All right, we have a question about work experience. Does years in a PhD program count towards work experience?
It depends. So it depends on the nature of the research that you are doing to support your PhD. There's lots of different examples, but it depends. So usually there's, 3 to 4 years of academic coursework followed by several years of research. And then depending on the nature of that research, especially if you were, working in a lab, managing a team of researchers, the nature of that research would, be the deciding factor of how it might apply towards full-time experience.
We have a question about the essay. In addition to the cover letter, is there any other essay I need to write?
There's no other essay at the time that you apply now, but if you are invited to interview, there is a short answer question that we ask all interviewees to respond to prior to the interview.
Here's a question about post-Sloan Fellows. If someone is interested in going into entrepreneurship after the program, what should they plan to take advantage of while they're at Sloan?
So there's lots of different resources depending on the type of entrepreneur you are or how established your idea is, or if you have, sometimes people come in with sort of a half-baked idea or, something that's already kind of off and running. So, the Trust Center for Entrepreneurship at MIT is kind of the number one spot you would look into. In addition to that, there are a couple different incubators and accelerators that could help you to grow and advise your startup idea. So I think, the first place you would look would be the Entrepreneurship Center, the Trust Center for Entrepreneurship. You can focus on entrepreneurship and innovation through a track in the coursework that you take, where the electives that you take would come from sort of a larger set of choices, an umbrella of choices. You'd, pick courses that are on a specific path. And then depending on kind of the nature of your startup idea, there's lots of different faculty members who could become, advisors as well.
All right. Any other things to avoid while approaching the application? Common mistakes applicants make.
I think it's really simple, like just try to follow the prompts answer the prompts that we're asking. We've designed the questions in the application to help correlate to the competencies and the attributes that we're looking to score you on throughout the reading and the interview process. So when applicants kind of go rogue with that, sometimes we don't get the data that we need. And then same in the interview, the video, try to just be as authentic as possible. It's really not intended to be something that you have to spend a lot of time editing or putting background music or anything like that. It's just a simple selfie, video, introduce yourself to your kind of hypothetical future classmates. And then in the interview, I think just being prepared for why MIT Sloan, what is your goal for the Sloan Fellows MBA? What do you hope to accomplish after graduating? Just so that we can kind of get a sense of where you want to be and, how your past experiences kind of correlate with that.
All right, we have a great next question. How does the admissions committee view gaps in a resume, perhaps for family reasons, personal reasons?
Yeah, it's not a problem for us at all, as long as, there's kind of an explanation for it. Certainly the Sloan Fellows MBA population sometimes is using this MBA experience to kind of kickstart a career after taking a break for a lot of different reasons. And, we support that. So as long as, in the employment section in the application, there's a couple short answer text boxes to explain any gaps or reasons for leaving one position and then having a break before, starting something else. So not a problem at all.
If
Great.
someone is interested in the business analytics certificate or the sustainability certificate, do those happen within the 1-year Sloan Fellows program, and do they cost extra?
They're certainly available. It does not cost extra. It's just about taking enough elective coursework from that certificates, or it's a certificate you can kind of think about as the equivalent of an undergraduate minor in something. So it's just about taking enough courses through that kind of grouping of elective choices in order to gain the certificate. Maybe we'll take one or two more.
Sure. For a candidate who has a startup idea and they're hoping to use the Sloan experience to nurture the idea, should they discuss that in their application, in their cover letter, or not?
Sure, yes, of course. Whatever your motivations are for pursuing the Sloan Fellows MBA, we want you to share with us.
And then this might be a great question to finish up on. Do you anticipate any changes to the program's format next year because of COVID-19? Can you just talk a little bit about the current class?
Yeah, so I don't have an answer to that. So, the current format is the Sloan Fellows MBA program is being delivered in a hybrid format, meaning that any students who are, willing and able to make it to Cambridge to take classes in person are able to do so. And at the same time, if there were students who were not able to come to Cambridge or chose not to, they can complete the degree program this year virtually. No official decisions have been made about what, the program beginning in 2021 will look like. So I think, we probably won't have more details on that until much later into the spring, really in hopes that we're able to deliver a fully in-person experience. But, we have to take it kind of day by day and then follow whatever government regulations are in place here in the US and also within the state of Massachusetts.
Any other questions, Lindsay?
I think we have a few specific ones that we weren't able to answer. So, we definitely encourage you to send us an email with any additional questions that if we weren't able to touch on.
Excellent.
During this session.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you all so much for joining us today. Here's some contact information if you have additional questions. We'll look forward to getting to know you all better throughout additional events that we have, as well as through the application process. Have a great day. Thanks so much.
Thank you.